is an act of sabotage, but we're waiting for more details once the investigation ends.
Right, thank you so much. Yasser Hakim joining us there live from Cairo. Now, the United Nations has raised the alarm in Zimbabwe over what it's described as one of the worst hunger crises in more than a decade. The global body says it plans to procure food assistance for 4 million Zimbabweans. Half the country's population has been listed as food insecure. Their situation has been further exacerbated by runaway inflation. CGTN's Beryl Oro brings us that story.
Once the breadbasket of Southern Africa, Zimbabwe is facing an unprecedented climate-related disaster, affecting crops and livestock, coupled with a debilitating economic crisis.
Extreme weather and an economic meltdown have pushed those people into severe hunger. And for a country that used to be the breadbasket of Southern Africa, the situation is nothing short of tragic. There's no other way of putting it.
The World Food Programme said it was concerned the situation might worsen for the country's 7.7 million food insecure people, with no rains assured for the main growing season.
This is all part of an unprecedented climate-driven disaster gripping Southern Africa. The country has experienced normal rainfall in just one of the last 5 growing seasons. Below average rainfall is again forecast for January through March 2020, which is the main growing season ahead of the April harvest. And that is, of course, what we call the lean season right before the harvest comes in.
The 240,000 tons of food aid planned to be distributed to 4.1 million people will be procured on international markets, representing a doubling of the WFP's current assistance program in Zimbabwe. The agency aims to purchase supplies from Tanzania in form of maize grain, as well as from Mexico, and pulses from Kenya and potentially the Black Sea area.
The crisis is being exacerbated by a dire shortage of foreign currency, runaway inflation, mounting unemployment, lack of fuel, prolonged power outages, and large-scale livestock losses. And they inflict the urban population just as well as rural villages.
Zimbabwe President Emmerson Mnangagwa's government opted not to remove grain subsidies next year, a move it says will protect impoverished citizens from rising food prices. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Well, let's get to you more now on the situation in Zimbabwe. We're joined on the line from the capital, Harare, by CGTN correspondent Farai Mokutoya. Farai, as we're hearing, almost half the population of Zimbabwe is said to be at risk of severe hunger. Now, we know Zimbabwe has faced a very tough couple of months, if not years. But what are the key factors that have contributed to this particular situation, this particular hunger situation that Zimbabweans are facing at the moment?
Well, Lindy, indeed, as has already been mentioned, we've had this, natural double hit from natural phenomenon, the drought which was experienced last year, the most severe that Zimbabwe has seen in recent memory, coupled with the cyclone that affected the eastern parts of the country, wiped out whatever food was projected from that area. But also the economy is causing challenges here. So ordinarily, where someone would have been able to go into a supermarket to buy maize meal, to buy other foodstuffs, they can't afford to do that because of the inflation that is being experienced, and also because of shortages of some of these basic commodities, because there's no foreign currency to bring in the raw material. So the economy is also making this food situation terrible, in that, where someone would have been able to buy, they are unable to do that. And given the other challenges of unemployment, of an economy that is slowing down, that also reduces the amount of disposable income people have. I'll give you a classic example of how the economy is wreaking havoc. I spoke to a lady who was in line to receive some food aid, and she said that even when she gets this maize, she will need money to go and get it ground into maize meal, and she doesn't have that money. So yes, she's getting the aid, but she requires additional funding to be able to put that out of the misery that she's facing and to be able to feed her family. So it is just a plethora of challenges facing Zimbabwe today.
Indeed, a very difficult situation facing many Zimbabweans. Thank you so much, Farai Mokutoya, on the line there with us from Harare. Now let's turn to developments in Uganda, where reports are emerging of a possible deadly landslide The affected area is the Mount Elgon region that's in the east of the country. As we understand, search and rescue operations are currently underway. Well, let's bring you more on the situation now. We're joined live from the capital, Kampala, by our correspondent, Michael Baleke. Michael, of course, we know that Mount Elgon, that particular region, is prone to landslides, but just give us an idea of what is happening there at the moment.
Hi, Lindy. This area in Bududa is prone to landslides. Almost every year we have landslides in this area. And for the last few weeks, the rainstorms have been heavy. And these rainstorms had winds with them, very strong winds. Now, much of this area is used for farming, and many of the trees have been, of course, cleared. And, of course, so today, as the soils for the last almost few days, it has been raining, the soils got soaked and the hills collapsed, sweeping crops and houses downhill in 2 villages on the slopes of Mount Elgon. The Red Cross tells us that one body has been recovered from the debris, and another person who was injured has been rushed to a nearby hospital. The Red Cross says rescue efforts are underway right now, and more bodies are likely to be recovered in the coming hours.
And considering that this wet weather is set to continue across large parts of East Africa, how are emergency services responding to this tragedy, and what challenges are they likely to face?
Lindy, well, first of all, these areas where the landslides happen are hard and dangerous to reach. The Red Cross says, of course, their volunteers are already on the ground in this area, but it is still raining heavily, and chances of other landslides happening are very high, which puts the rescue teams at risk. So it's already getting dark now in this area, and there is no power. Of course, up in the hills, there is no power. So it's very dark, which means there is zero visibility. So nothing much may come through tonight. The roads are muddy and nearly impassable. So you cannot reach these areas with a car. You have to walk. So the challenges remain how to get things like clean water, how to get the rescue teams to places where the landslides have happened, how to get food, blankets, and of course first aid kits to the victims, then how to get those injured to the hospital. So I think if there are people who need to be rescued, they may need to wait until tomorrow.
Very worrying indeed, especially since that wet weather is set to continue. Thank you so much, Michael Baleke, live with us there from Kampala. Well, on that note, concerns over the drastic effects of changing weather patterns have gone up a notch at the UN Climate Change Conference in Madrid. The head of the World Meteorological Organization says global warming shows no signs of abating.
Climate change is proceeding, and things haven't been improving according to the Paris Agreement. So we haven't seen any indications of improvement in the real status of atmosphere when it comes to implementation of the Paris Agreement. The last 10 years have been the warmest period during this 170 years period. So far, the warmest year was 2016, when we had a very strong El Niño, which was boosting the warming. But if you look at this graph, you can see that the warming still continues, and there's no indication of phase out of the warming.
Well, furthermore, Peteri Tala says the levels of greenhouse gases on the planet have reached a record high. He also said sea levels are up 10 to 20 meters higher than they were 3 million years ago. He added that the past decade has witnessed a speed up in the melting of glaciers worldwide. The WMO has reported that 2019 is on course to becoming one of the third warmest years on record. The annual UN conference is expected to lay the ground for a new phase of climate action from 2020. The 2-week event comes as global efforts to cut greenhouse gas emissions are on the brink of failure. Filio Contrafuri reports from Madrid.
This is an urgent situation, and it's been highlighted day after day by all this alarming data and the reports that have been coming out. And actually, there is even more alarming data that's on the way. For example, today, the second day of the conference, the World Health Organization is presenting its own global survey called Health and Climate Change that will be explaining the effects of climate change on the human health. Now, according to the World Health Organization, if the measures that are outlined in the Paris Agreement were implemented, that means that over more than 1 million deaths would be avoided globally across the world every year. Also, the World Health Organization says that the environment risks that are linked to climate change are responsible for more than 12 million deaths every year. And despite all this alarming data and all the strong language that we've been hearing since yesterday, especially by the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who said that the Earth is moving towards a point of no return for climate change, it doesn't seem that yet all this has served like a real wake-up call, because what everyone has been talking about here is the way to deal with climate change is multilateralism. It's about united action, that all this is tackled globally, and if there's any wake-up call, it will be translated into action.
Well, time now for a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. West African leaders expected in Abuja to map out strategies to counter regional security threats. And Cape Town switches on its annual festive season lights for the 50th time.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca. Among the crowds in Cairo.
Who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile. Along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Leaders of the West African regional bloc, ECOWAS, are due to meet in Abuja to consolidate their plans to tackle jihadists. Groups like ISIL and Al-Qaeda have increased their presence in West Africa, and they're stoking ethnic violence in countries like Burkina Faso and Mali. So leaders are determined to stop them, but just why is West Africa a preferred target for jihadists? CGTN's Deji Badmus has more.
Over 2,200 attacks in the last 4 years, 11,500 dead, thousands wounded, millions displaced and economic activities grounded. Those were the grim statistics reeled out by the president of the ECOWAS Commission, Jean-Claude Brou, at the last summit of the regional body in Burkina Faso. There's been several more attacks and deaths since September when the ECOWAS summit held. West Africa, especially the Sahel, is increasingly coming under siege by jihadists.
Islamic State had a lot of challenges in Syria, so they began to throw their lights more towards areas where they could recruit people en masse because of the poverty and the disorganized states, where they could penetrate government systems, move cash, because we have not sanitized our financial system, where they could also strike, hit, and run away, because we had a large mass of unpoliced areas.
It's difficult to tell the actual number of jihadist groups operating in the region, but ISIL and Al-Qaeda are very much active in a large area of ungoverned spaces in the Sahel. For ISIL, the region is becoming its new frontier after it was dislodged from Syria and Iraq, and it's Mali and once peaceful Burkina Faso that are bearing the brunt of the attacks.
If you are able to find out where their funds are coming from, apart from the armed robberies and the kidnappings, leave that out. Where is the main source of income coming from? Once you are able to do that, you weaken them quite to a very, very large extent.
It's something the intelligence agencies of the Sahel and even the Sahara have not been able to crack. Lack of funding also to wage a serious war against the jihadists has helped in giving them some sort of free rein. The G5 Sahel force set up to tackle them has been hampered by poor funding. The leaders of the region have now pledged $1 billion in funding to help get the force to be fully operational. But beyond military force, analysts say political leaders must work to improve standard of living in the region and create economic opportunities for young people.
If most of our youth are jobless, the truth is that they will take the job from the enemy. If someone's sitting at home, no job, no motivation from the state, and the enemy comes with some dollars and naira, he will go for the enemy's offer. And that is why we need to ensure that we eliminate what we call psychological murder, that is joblessness.
Regional leaders would be meeting in Abuja later this month to finalize discussions on their next approach to dealing with what is fast becoming a huge crisis. They know time is not on their side. How quickly they're able to come up with an effective response to the activities of the jihadists is extremely important, especially for countries like Mali and Burkina Faso that are seemingly becoming overwhelmed by the terrorists. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Meanwhile, UN peacekeeping troops are set to step up their coordination with Congolese armed forces in order to better protect civilians. The peacekeepers will also help combat armed groups in the east of the DRC. This comes as 4 people in Benin were killed in fresh protests against UN and Congolese forces. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa has more from Kinshasa.
Protesters marched to the UN peacekeeping mission headquarters in Kinshasa, demanding the withdrawal of peacekeepers from Beni. They accused the UN of failing to protect people in the eastern city from rebel attacks. More than 100 civilians have been killed in Beni since October 30th. The attacks have been blamed on the Allied Democratic Forces, a Ugandan rebel group. But the UN Under-Secretary for Peacekeeping Operations says they're determined to stop the killings in the area.
The frustrations of the people in Beni are understandable, but what's important now is to stop the killings and restore peace. We've agreed to reinforce our partnership with the Congolese army. The peacekeeping mission will remain until the DRC government asks us to leave. This is a sovereign state which we respect.
But locals in Beni have continued demanding for the withdrawal of the peacekeepers. On Monday, 4 of them were killed by Congolese security officers in a protest in Beni. But a political analyst believes the UN has been unfairly criticized.
The issue of MONUSCO leaving the DRC is not the problem, but rather our government's ability to protect the population from militia groups.
Last week, the Congolese army said it killed a top commander of the Allied Democratic Forces in an offensive in the east.
The current mandate of the UN peacekeeping mission in the DRC expires on 20th December. DRC President Felix Tshisekedi has already asked the mission to continue supporting his government to restore peace in the east of the country. The UN Security Council will have to adopt a resolution renewing its mandate before it expires. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
The African Union Commission has hosted a forum to mobilize the necessary financial and material support for the Ebola crisis in the Democratic Republic of Congo. CGTN's Gurum Chala has been following developments at the ongoing Commission forum and filed this report.
The Ebola outbreak in DRC has so far claimed over 2,000 lives, and according to the World Health Organization, the situation remains to be alarming. Here at the African Union Commission headquarters, many, including the government of DR Congo, the AU, and the United Nations representatives came together in order to locate the needed financial and material support to help stop the spread of Ebola in DRC and its neighbors.
We had a very successful forum. There is solidarity being shown from all the participants that this pledge, it will be financial and in kind, and it will be directed to support the government of DRC for the preparedness and for the response and for building the capacity of the country to fight and to tackle Ebola and even other epidemics.
The Ebola outbreak in DRC is still not under control, but now there is a drop in a number of new cases. The Minister of Health of the country paints the clear picture.
We are now witnessing a sharp drop in Ebola cases. That is the number of people contaminated. Now, prior to that, we were recording 25 cases per day, but now there are days where we don't even have a single case.
The African Union said it will continue its efforts of mobilizing resources for the fight against Ebola, not only in DRC, but also in other areas.
This forum, it will be followed by another forum on the sidelines of the summit. It will be in February here in Addis Ababa. We are planning to have another kind of a forum to continue mobilizing resources, especially from the private sector, from Africa and outside Africa.
At least 2 repetitive Ebola outbreaks have been seen in DRC recently, and WHO has announced them to be a public health emergency of international concern. Now, there seems to be a strong coordinated effort being exerted by the WHO, the Africa CDC, and the government of DR Congo to stop the virus. And so far, things look so good. Grumtara CUTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Meanwhile, Africa has made significant progress in the fight against HIV and AIDS. CGTN's Wilkista Nyabwa now reports from the Rwandan capital on the discussions and recommendations posed by delegates at the International Conference on AIDS and STIs in Africa.
Africa is celebrating. Decades worth of hard work is paying off as African countries continue to make great strides in the fight against HIV and AIDS. Globally, there are 39.7 million people living with HIV and AIDS. Of these, 75% live in Africa. And Africa is now feeling the impact of the different approaches governments and organizations have employed to tackle the epidemic.
Millions of people are on treatment. Even better, millions of people are not on treatment because they have the tools to protect themselves. We have accelerated research and development. We have pushed back the boundaries of science and are now in hot pursuit of a cure.
Rwanda is one of the countries that are on course down a path agreed on by governments across the world. In 2014, UNAIDS launched the Fast Track initiative calling for the scaling up of HIV prevention and treatment programs to reduce new infections. It also launched the 90-90-90 targets. But what exactly does this mean? Governments agreed to ensure that among their citizens, 90% of people living with HIV to be diagnosed, 90% of those diagnosed to access antiretroviral therapy, and 90% of those accessing treatment to get viral suppression, meaning the virus is undetectable and therefore impossible to spread. Rwanda is leading the pack.
97% of HIV-positive people in Rwanda are on treatment. And 90% are suppressing the viral loads.
Other countries continue to grapple with a myriad challenges.
The gains we have made are under threat, with the signs of wavering political commitment and declining funding.
Health is about making good choices right now for benefits that may only be felt years later. Ultimately, this is what will enable us to win this fight against HIV and AIDS.
In other countries, key populations such as men having sex with men, transgender communities, and sex workers remain overlooked. But in all instances, Experts agree that in order to work toward an Africa free of AIDS, Africa must secure political commitment, especially to fund healthcare, tap into communities to meet their needs, and unlock innovations in order to win the war against HIV and AIDS. Wilkisanyabwa, CGTN, Rwanda.
The head of Palestinian group Hamas has been in Cairo for meetings. Egypt has been leading discussions on finding a truce between Israel and Palestinian leaders in Gaza. CGTN's Adel Al-Mahrawi has more.
Since his election as the chief of Hamas in 2017, Ismail Haniyeh is having his first international tour this week. Starting with Cairo, Haniyeh is expected to make stops in Russia, Turkey and Qatar.
The situation in Gaza is tensed, which is signaling warnings about further suffrage for the Palestinian people. Cairo wants to limit the impact. Haniyeh is the head of the ruling regime in Gaza. His presence here is to discuss the next moves for the Strip.
On the same day Haniyeh arrived, Cairo has also hosted for the first time Ziad Nakhla, the Secretary General of the Palestinian armed group Al-Jihad. It's the group which engaged against Israel in their recent clashes in Gaza. It's not clear if the Egyptian intelligence held a joint meeting with Hamas and Al-Jihad. Their presence, however, hints Egypt's prime concern.
It is clear that the priority of this round of talks is to reach a long truce between the Palestinians and Israel. That will make the environment suitable to hold a Palestinian election and pave the way for unity among Palestinian factions. This is in hopes to resume peace talks, which currently seems impossible because of the political turbulence in Israel.
Egypt controls Gaza's only non-Israeli passage. That has made Cairo a key broker when reaching several ceasefire agreements with the Israelis. Previous agreements focused on Israel and Egypt lifting restrictions over movements of goods and people in exchange to calm at the Israeli fence border with Gaza. Egypt knows that any truce in Gaza will not last long. It's why the country has been recently moving to get unilateral agreements on holding general Palestinian elections, hoping that it will form a unity government recognized by all factions. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
And let's now go to Ramah Nyang with your business news.
Thank you very much, Lindy. Here's what's coming up in business. Tanzania's economy is forecast to grow by just under 6% next year. And we'll explore how South African Airways has lost more than $700 million in the last 2 financial years.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. The World Bank is forecasting that Tanzania's economy will grow by 5.8% next year, compared to the previous estimate of 5.6%. Now, that boost is essentially going to be driven, in the World Bank's view, by recovery in exports and growing tourist arrivals and spending. But of course, this is all dependent in part on speedy reforms to improve fiscal management and the business environment, especially for private sector investment and growth. The rate of expansion is also expected to rise to 5.8% in 2020 and 6.1% the year after. While Tanzania's economic growth prospects do remain positive, sustainability of that growth does remain a concern unless the private sector takes a much larger role in the East African economy. Further south, South Africa's state-owned airline, South African Airways, has lost more than $700 million in the last 2 fiscal years. SAA has not made a profit since 2011, and it has been dependent on government bailouts to remain solvent ever since. It has also suffered from a crippling strike in the month of November, which pushed it to the brink of collapse. Now, there are growing concerns about whether or not this carrier will be able to continue operations for at least 12 months. This comes in the wake of cancellation of ticket sales by leading travel agency Flight Centre due to the lack of faith in the long-term viability of this as a going concern. Here's CGTN's Sumitra Naidu with the details.
On Friday, international travel agency Flight Centre stopped SAA ticket sales. Some other agents too said they were staying away from SAA sales because passengers were concerned about the airline going completely bust. There's also concerns about safety.
The unusual thing about SAA and its ticket sales problem is that no one had really understood properly, in government that is, the sensitivity of the airline to confidence. People require an airline to be both absolutely safe and to know that it's going to fly in 6 months' time. And these travel agencies are exposed to risk, and therefore they will only book on airlines that they are comfortable are going to actually be operating in those 6 months' time.
SAA, though, is still flying to a number of routes locally, regionally and internationally. Airline management has been holding a series of discussions with both government and private lenders to secure funding. SAA's debt is close to $1.5 billion. Government says it has no more money to help. The banks are also reluctant to extend credit to the corruption-riddled airline.
As to what happens next is that SAA will in fact not be allowed to fail. It really is at this stage too big to fail. The loss of connectivity for travel and tourism and business opportunities. Government is not going to let that happen at this stage, so it will continue to trickle feed the airline cash as it needs. I believe that the real problem right now is that confidence in the airline has been undermined by Minister Mboweni saying that he will no longer continue to guarantee the airline's debts. So I think that will probably change today.
The Department of Public Enterprises is overseeing a radical restructuring that's expected to be a last effort to save the airline. SAA has been ordered to submit its financials to Parliament. That deadline is in less than 24 hours. It's unclear at this stage if management will be in Parliament. This is the second year that SAA has failed to submit its financials. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
And we're still in Africa's most industrialized economy. ArcelorMittal plans to shut down its Saldanha steel operations in South Africa. And those plans have sent shockwaves through the local community. The closure poses a risk to at least 1,000 jobs. CGTN's Angela Coppola filed this report.
Businesses in the steel and manufacturing sector are under enormous pressure. This as the South African economy continues contracting. But for ArcelorMittal, there might be some hope as there are 2 potential buyers waiting in the wings.
So we're very excited. We're a bit concerned as to how AMSA will look at this, but we'll await their response on this. We've asked the same question in the retrenchment process recently, and they said they are open to any credible buyers. It's just our concern what they mean by credible.
It's not just ArcelorMittal that's suffering in the local steel and manufacturing sectors, though.
So if you think about it, low levels of domestic demand, increasing input costs, then you also have the issue of low investment, the increase in electricity prices, port costs and fuel costs. All of these factors have an impact on the operating environment of companies.
The sector leaders have approached government for support with limited response, and any potential buyers are likely to face the same issues.
We're talking directly to issues like the electricity tariffs, the transport tariffs, the ore costs from Kumba. If they want to keep the same processes going, not change many things, they will face the same challenges with regards to those costs. Unless, with the new buyers coming in, they find that the assistance from government that the government proposed to AMSA will assist them, and they can run the place more profitable.
Should the buyers drop by the wayside, the consequences will be dire for the workers, their families and their communities. On an industry level, there are many businesses under pressure at the moment.
And if a business should retrench people or ultimately close doors completely, it will then have that ripple effect on these smaller businesses, which will then further impact on other value chains within the sector.
One of the biggest input costs is electricity, and with the current issues facing the state-owned entity, there are some questions about any discounting.
The feedback from AMSA on Eskom's assistance was that, for one, it's not big enough, and then there's also the red tape issues, with regards to the process. So Eskom made a proposal on reduced tariffs, but then that proposal needs to go to the Eskom board, and then from there it still has to go through NERSA. So that may take another 12 to 18 months, according to AMSA, and that just is going to take too long.
But at the back of their minds is probably the thought that they might be creating competition for themselves elsewhere. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Nigeria's central bank says it will intensify policy measures designed to get around $4 billion in non-oil export revenue next year. Now, the move is designed as part of broader efforts to reduce Nigeria's singular dependence on crude oil for just about all of its foreign exchange earnings. CGTN's Ajak Mangut brings us up to speed.
Thus far this year, revenue from agricultural produce, manufactured goods and raw materials has earned Nigeria $2 billion. The central bank target is to double that. Two Nigerian banks, that's the Apex and Nigeria Export-Import, are offering a total of $1.4 billion in loans to local manufacturers and producers. Businesses will be lent the money at rates of less than 10% to enable them expand their production. Now, the central bank governor in June predicted that the country's economic growth will be in the double digits by 2024. But Nigeria has long struggled to generate a foreign exchange from revenue from sources other than its main export, that's crude oil. The country lost an estimated $2.8 billion in revenues in 2018, mainly due to a slump in oil prices and oil-related crimes like pipeline vandalism, illegal oil bunkering and theft. The government hopes that revenue generated outside oil will help in the provision of basic amenities and infrastructural development and the overall improvement of the well-being of Nigerians. Ajak Mangut, CGTN, Abuja.
Well, our story for you. As NATO meets in London, two members of this old military alliance are squabbling over tariffs. The US trade officials are saying that President Donald Trump is considering levying extra tariffs on some $2.4 billion of goods from France. Now, the proposed action would cover duties on French champagne, handbags and other luxury commodities. Earlier on, we spoke to CGTN's Roy Ruttenberg about what exactly the White House is trying to achieve here.
To really understand what Washington is doing, you have to understand what Paris did first. France's Senate voted last month, gave final approval for a so-called digital tax. That's a 3% levy on big tech firms that will be applied retroactively to the start of 2019. Now, their aim is to raise around $850 million in revenue and to get these companies to start paying more taxes. We're talking about Amazon, Google, Facebook, Apple, really big American global firms. And right now, most pay little or no tax in countries where they don't have a physical presence. So France's move is really just part of the latest effort to change that. But the Trump administration, well, they're not too happy about it. It conducted so-called Section 301 investigations into this French tax, the same sort of investigative process, we should note, that it applied to China's practices, which, as we know, resulted in a full-out trade war. Now, those 301 investigations, they've concluded, and the senior U.S. trade representative, Robert Lighthizer, suggested that Donald Trump, the U.S. president, could announce a tariff of up to 100% on French items, like you said, champagne, cheese, handbags, all these things that American consumers really love to consume. Now remember, this could still go away. Trump, as you mentioned, is in London for the NATO summit. He's due to meet with Macron this week, and Macron has already said that his country's digital tax could be scrapped if a similar international agreement could be reached. And some analysts are already suggesting that this announcement by the American trade rep is really just part of the White House's negotiating strategy.
2019, clearly the year of trade conflicts. Now, we're going to leave it there for the time being, but I'll be back at the top of the hour. We're looking at the latest GDP data from South Africa. We're seeing a contraction of 0.6% in the third quarter. Mining, agriculture and manufacturing particularly badly hit. What happens now? I'll have some details for you at the top of the hour. For now, though, back to Lindy.
Thanks, Ramah. Well, you are watching Africa Live. Let's take a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. Coming up, Cape Town switches on its annual festive season lights for the 50th time.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
An acrobatic juggler is looking to make Nigerians fall in love with the circus. For Ekpowawan Edem, it's not only a form of entertainment, but an art. CGTN's Dejibad was caught up with the passionate acrobat.
Guinean acrobats move to the rhythm of music, hanging from just a hula hoop. It's an elegant display of flexibility. These acrobats are part of the Patatrack Circus, the very first circus group in Nigeria. It's headed by Ekpowawan Edem, a Nigerian who fell in love with acrobatics after watching live performances in the 90s. She then went on to have her first circus training in Massachusetts and then in France and Switzerland, all because of her love for the art and its physical and mental health benefits.
Circus training helps with creativity. It also focuses on like discipline and focus and teamwork. So building qualities that they might not necessarily get in a normal classroom setting. Physically, you get a lot of physical strength, stamina, flexibility, so your physical fitness increases.
Now a professional acrobat, Edem decided to bring circus entertainment to her motherland. But unlike China, which has a prestigious circus tradition dating back many centuries, the art is new to Nigeria. In fact, Edem couldn't find her dream team here until she went to Guinea. There she assembled this team of 4 acrobats, brought them to Nigeria, and together they've been performing shows across the country to introduce more people to the art.
It's been hard because Nigeria, I seem to be one of very, very, very few people doing this. I'm making it up as I go along. I'm establishing the whole industry as I move forward, which is hard. But at the same time, it's also been good because I have had a lot of support from family and friends.
Beyond the support of family and friends, Edem's Patatrack Circus hasn't been having it easy. She says it's a hassle getting invited to perform and breaking into the limelight.
One of the challenges we've had, trying to convince people to book us for their events. They would rather book a big name like David O rather than book us. I would like to feel that what we offer is a lot more exciting than somebody standing with a microphone and singing.
While she may not be having it easy for now, Edem is optimistic that with time, Nigerians would embrace the circus as an artistic expression.
I would like to see circus arts become commonplace in Nigeria. So I would like to see us being more accepted and recognized so that more children can participate because it makes them happy to participate.
As she tackles the challenge of getting more acceptability, Edem aims to eventually open a center that would double as a performance venue and an institute to train kids into professional acrobats. Her circus group has performed at shows and festivals in countries like France, Belgium, Ethiopia and Morocco. But the big dream for them is to spread the rich artistry of circus into West Africa. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Abuja, Nigeria.
Let's go to Cape Town, South Africa now. It is safe to say the 2019 festive season is officially underway. That's after the city's annual festive lights were switched on. Crowds gathered in the Cape Town city centre to see the mayor turn on the lights.
thousands packed Cape Town's Grand Parade to celebrate the festive light switch on at a free street concert. Some of South Africa's top musical talent wowed the crowds as they waited for the city lights to be turned on. This year marks the 50th anniversary of the Cape Town Festival of Lights, when the city centre comes to life with a display of hundreds of lights to celebrate the holiday season. And it's become tradition for Cape Townians and tourists to flock to the city centre to catch a glimpse of the Christmas and holiday-themed lights throughout December and January.
It's a very important event as far as the city of Cape Town are concerned. It is our own event organised by ourselves. It is to get in the region of 80,000 plus people together to thank them for their support during the past year, to encourage them going into the festive season.
The mayor of Cape Town said the city was looking forward to a bumper tourism season and assured visitors that authorities would pull out all the stops to give them a warm Cape Town welcome.
Cape Town is pretty safe for them to come and visit Cape Town. We're a tourist destination. We will roll out the red carpet for them, and we will make sure that we're friendly. Tourists must know they can come to Cape Town with a very clear mind, a clear heart, to come and enjoy what we have to offer.
Renadal Calm, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
Your sports news coming up after the break. Eric Majura retains the Mr. Tanzania bodybuilding crown and will now represent his country at Mr. Universe.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Sports news now, and we start with athletics, where world men's 1,500-meter champion Timothy Cheruiyot knows his best friend and London 2017 gold medalist Elijah Manangoe stands between him and his dream of winning the Olympics title at the Tokyo 2020 Games next summer.
This is a tale of bitter rivals on the track turned best friends off it from Kenya, who could spice up the Tokyo 2020 Olympics next summer.
My prayers is to get into the team. That's my prayer. And Olympics for me is starting now.
And when Kenyan runner Timothy Cheruiyot is sprinting to the finish at the world's top races, he knows there's one man who can stand between him and the gold, his best friend. The shy 24-year-old trains alongside fellow Kenyan